Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sydney, and today I'm going to drink a boba and talk to you a little bit about what might be one of my favorite television characters of all time, Miss Blair Cornelia Waldorf of Gossip Girl. So, strap in, because I have some notes, and we're going to talk all about our girl. A couple ground rules for this video. Given current events, I just want to remind us that we are talking about a television show and fictional characters, not the actors who portray them. Also, we're focusing on the television show. Gossip Girl is based on a book series, but I didn't read that book series, which is shocking, but I know a lot. I've watched the TV show like 5 times, so that's where we will be focusing. And I will be using my knowledge of 50 million viewings of this show and various episodes and scenes, in addition to verifying things in the Gossip Girl Wikia, because fandom Wikias are just the best place to get sources for things like this. So let's get started. Who is Blair Waldorf? At the start of the series, Blair Waldorf is a high school junior queen bee at Constance, which is her Upper Eastside private school. She has a boyfriend, Nate Archibald, who you could consider like the catch of the world. And she is a child of two pretty successful parents. I believe her father is a lawyer and her mother is a successful fashion designer, and they are recently divorced. We'll get more into that in a bit. Her best friend in the whole wide world has just returned to New York City after a mysterious disappearance. And some traits to describe Blair and set the framework are conniving, vindictive, funny, ambitious, and intelligent. To really understand Blair Waldorf, I think you have to understand her family dynamics first and foremost. Her mother, Eleanor Waldorf, like I mentioned before, is a successful fashion designer. She's working to get her clothing line in like department stores, high-end luxury department stores like Bergdorf's, but also she has like a flagship store that you see in the first season. So she's a more traditional designer in that way as well. She is a pretty inattentive and self-absorbed mother. She cares about Blair. I think that that's pretty clear in the early seasons, but she doesn't really pay attention to her and what her real needs are. She's a little dismissive of Blair at the same time. This is evidenced best to me by the photo shoot debacle early in season one. This storyline includes Blair being selected to be the face and model of her mother's collection as it's going into a major retailer. And Blair's personality and style is not really meshing well with the inspiration and vibe of the photo shoot and what they're trying to give off for the fashion line. So they determine that they need to replace her. The person they choose to replace her is her best friend, Serena, who is a little bit more vivacious and outgoing and kind of all over the place, if I have to say it that way. And so they trick Blair into saying like, hey, they're going in a different direction, but they don't tell her it's Serena. And then they bring Serena to the photo shoot telling her that her and Blair are going to do it together, knowing that that's not true. But Blair's mother's a part of this. Instead of having a conversation with her daughter and just saying, we think we need to go in a different direction, she decides to lie, and really put Blair in an uncomfortable situation, because even if she didn't end up coming to the photo shoot to like see what was going on, she would have seen the end result on like a billboard or in a magazine and saw Serena in the same outfit that she was supposed to model. And so I think that's another good example. Another moment early in the series, I think it might be episode 2 of the series, in fact, if not the first one, is her mother comes to her and tells her that she will never be as beautiful or thin as she is right now, and that's why she should wear one dress over the other to an event that they're going to.
You will never be more beautiful or thin or happy than you are right now.
And I think the worst part about this, and this is a trigger warning that will come up throughout this, so if you have struggles with disordered eating and distorted body image, I recommend this might not be the video for you. We're not going to belabor the point in any way, but if you feel you may be triggered, feel free to click out. I understand. But she is a character who before the start of the series was in treatment for an eating disorder. And so to emphasize her daughter's thinness in that moment and that she'll never be that body type again is just so problematic and harmful to her child in a way that like a mother should never be, but especially like a mother who knows that her child struggles with this issue, which is clear at that point in the series. Another time where I'll say her mother is self-absorbed is that, like I mentioned before, her father and her mother are divorced, and we'll get into her dad a little bit more, but he no longer lives in New York City. He actually lives in Europe, I believe Paris, but definitely France. And she straight up tells her dad, like the mom straight up tells Blair's dad not to come for the holidays for Thanksgiving, knowing that it is Blair and his tradition to, you know, bake together and get the food ready for the Thanksgiving dinner, and that Blair's really looking forward to seeing her father and having some sense of normalcy and connection and community with her dad. And because of her mother's feelings about how the divorce went down, and I am not disregarding how hurtful that could be, she didn't think of some solution that still let her daughter have time with her father for this major holiday. And that's just 3 very early examples that kind of set the framework for how Eleanor treats her daughter Blair. But I do think that the one thing that Blair gets positively from her mother is that ambition and drive. Seeing her mother run such a successful business and establish herself in this way really does influence Blair throughout the series. One of Blair's biggest storylines later on in the run of the show is that she wants to be a powerful woman. And while powerful woman was so vague and doesn't really have, like, it's not a job description, right? It is probably aligned with seeing her mother be such a strong, powerful woman, kind of calling the shots in her own business. Next, let's talk about Blair's trifling daddy. We know I love dragging a father around here. If you don't know, watch my Marissa Cooper or Moesha video. These dads are terrible on teen TV. But I think what sucks about Howard, I believe that's his name, I hate him too much to look it up right now, is that this was Blair's emotional support parent at the start of the series. And he's so neglectful in his decision making that I just can't condone giving him any flowers. It's established in flashbacks and even just the way that they interact in future episodes when he appears, that this is really the parent that Blair leans on for emotional support, validation. That's who she talked to. That's the shoulder that she cried on. But after her parents' divorce, which was messy, Howard comes out as gay, marries one of Eleanor, the mom's male models, and traipses off to Europe. And I understand wanting to get out of New York City. I say it was messy because this is a universe in which gossip is toxic and crazy and everywhere, and they are a high profile family, right? So I understand wanting to leave New York City. Leaving the country and not visiting for real is crazy. You have a teenage daughter who needs you. There's no way you didn't see how Eleanor treated or neglected Blair emotionally and didn't say, maybe I go to Connecticut and get a little cottage. I don't know, like anything else, like somewhere you could get to and from the train. Not Europe, not France, not the countryside of Europe. Like that's crazy. And I think that it's part of the reason Blair is so hurt and so cruel, especially at the start of the series, but throughout. I think she didn't have anybody to give her a hug for a very long time. I think she was missing hugs from a parent. And that's why I can't be Team Howard. I can't give him any flowers. I can't do it. I can't, because at least Eleanor was there and she tried. Where were you, Howard? Where were you? Exactly. But there were 2 people who saw the gaps in my girl Blair's life and they stepped up. And the first one we're going to talk about is Cyrus. Because Cyrus Rose is not the stepfather. That's the father that stepped up. Period. Cyrus Rose is a breath of fresh air on this show, especially as like a parent and especially in the Waldorf family. I think that this is a character that makes Blair a better person. I think of her co-opting Cyrus is like, not enough, and like hugging people. She hugs him later. Like, she softens up around Cyrus. He's not the person that she expected her mother to be with, but that's the person who like her mother and Blair kind of needed to come into their lives. I think that it makes her a softer person. I think that she kind of regrets that when things happen to her later, but I think that there's like a softness and an emotional intimacy to them. When Blair has issues with Chuck, her boyfriend, she doesn't go to her mother. She don't go on the phone and call her daddy in Europe. She talks to Cyrus about it and feels better or makes decisions based on what he says. Like, she really comes to value what Cyrus means to her and the family rather quickly. And I think that he is a great addition to the show, especially in its second season, because I think it allowed growth for Blair and it gave her a character to kind of make her growth feel realistic and kind of react to. I think that the series Gossip Girl is such a small world that sometimes when they bring in characters, it goes horribly. But I think Cyrus is an example of a character that really helped build something and added something to the cast of the series. And the other person who I consider Blair's family is Dorota. Dorota is Blair's mother to me. That's Blair's mom. Like, she takes care of Blair. She loves Blair. She believes in Blair. She does overindulge her, and especially in her schemes. But she also tries to reel our girl in sometimes. She's like, I don't think you should do that. But I think that because Dorota is the housekeeper and kind of Blair's nanny, I'm assuming she started as Blair's nanny and then stayed on or something with the family. But she tries her best with the power that she has. And I think what really epitomizes what Dorota is to the Waldorf family and Blair in particular is later on in the series, Cyrus buys a pretty extravagant gift. I believe an apartment for Dorota and her partner. I don't believe they're married yet at that point, but her partner as they're having a baby or growing their family. And Eleanor is like, why would you buy Dorota such an exorbitant gift? And Cyrus is like, because Dorota's family. She raised Blair. And Eleanor is so shook and disgusted. And I feel like anyone watching at home was like, yeah, and did. And deserves more, actually. Give her this apartment. Like, give her this home, actually. She be here more than you anyway, Eleanor. And I just love Dorota. I love that relationship. They're so cute. They are the show to me. I feel like Blair and Dorota kind of are more important than Serena and Blair at points in the series. But that does not mean that we get to escape talking about Blair's friendships and relationships, unfortunately. So let's do it. I put friendships and relationships together for this video. One, because it's my video and I can. And two, because the dating pool of Gossip Girl is incestuous. And we cannot talk about one without the other. So they must come together. We will start off with Serena Vanderwoodson. Serena will be getting her own video in the future. I have to deep dive into this girl and her psyche because what's wrong with her? I literally wrote down deep sigh in my notes. She is Blair's best friend at the start of the series, but she's awful. She sucks. She's a terrible friend. The reason that she disappeared, or part of the reason, I won't say it's the whole reason, there are other things going on. The reason she disappears at the start of the season, or part of the reason she disappears at the start of the season, is because she slept with Blair's boyfriend, Nate. She also, gets Dan drunk later in the series. We'll get to Dan and Blair, but she gets Dan drunk and then does the exact same thing again. I think, at the end of the series. I think in the same bar. You're sick and twisted. Why would you do that? That's what I mean when I say, Serena, I can't with her. She's flighty. She's undependable. They backstab each other. I am not going to say that Blair doesn't do cruel things back to her. There's a storyline very early in the series where Blair, to, get back at Serena for sleeping with Nate once she finds out. I think that's why. It might have been because Serena did something else. They bicker a lot. But she, insinuates that Serena's in a rehab facility when that's not true. She was visiting her brother who was in a mental health facility, but, not Serena. And also, even if she was, why would you put that on blast? Blair, please. Got to be changed. Fantastic. 1, 2, 3. There she is. What took you so long? But I think the reason that makes me so disgusted with Serena and why she needs her own video is that Serena pretends like she's innocent. I'm pretty sure if you asked Blair Waldorf if she was a good person, she'd be like, I don't care. No. But Serena's like, I'm becoming better. I gotta go. I'm going to become a better person. And never does. She never does. And the way that it usually leaves Blair with a short end of the stick trying to pick up the pieces. But I also think that relationship with Serena shows how loyal of a friend Blair is. And we'll get to her loyalty, I think, throughout this conversation. Serena disappears. It's not even been a year since she slept with the girl's boyfriend. And when she sees Serena needs help or is in trouble, she jumps into action to help make something happen for her. In the first season, the second season, throughout the series, she's the one who's showing up to help save Serena from herself. And I think that despite Blair's vindictiveness and her need for revenge and her conniving spirit, she cares about the people she cares about. And that leads me into talking about someone who I'm going to put in the friends bucket, even though you could say like frenemies or just straight up enemies. And that is Jenny Humphrey. Jenny to me is one of the most telling relationships in Blair's story on the show. I think that they're almost mirrors of each other, but like from different dimensions. They're both very ambitious. They love fashion and style, and they feel like they have to earn what they have. Obviously, for two very different reasons. Jenny is not as privileged financially and with like, generational wealth. She's still rich. Let's be clear. The Humphreys are not broke. But she's not the Waldorf. She's not the Vanderwoodson. She's not the Archibald. She's not the Basses. And so I think that while she's trying to prove herself that she deserves to be in the society, Blair's trying to prove that she can be better than everyone else. She, like, a lot of things come very easy to Serena, who we just talked about. And I think Blair feels like she has to prove why she's allowed in the rooms that she's allowed in, because she doesn't have kind of that effervescent people want to be around her spirit. She's a little off-putting, I think, because of a lot of her drive and her seriousness and her like intensity, that doesn't make you go, oh, I want to be your friend, the way people kind of gravitate towards Serena. And they can't get along because of that. Jenny is a threat to what Blair has built. Jenny is a threat to the reputation Blair has built as like being the best person and this leader and all of these things, because how can this girl from Brooklyn come in and be a queen bee as a sophomore in high school when I'm like a senior and like all of these things? Like, I understand the psyche of a crazy person that would like be like, yeah, I feel this way about this freshman, sophomore taking over my spot. And I think at the start of the series, Blair does use Jenny for her own ends. Obviously, Blair does use people. She is, conniving and manipulative and all of those things. I think there was a respect for Jenny that devolves into petty drama that kind of harms and damages the relationship. But I think that respect is still there, which is why in the series finale, when they do the flash forward, Jenny is working with Waldorf Designs that Blair is running. And I think that's such like a natural and beautiful point to be like, they were able to heal because they both were able to find that mutual respect. And I think that's because Jenny will never not admire what Blair has been able to do for herself. And Blair cannot knock Jenny's ambition and tenacity. And I love that about them. And I think that kind of those similarities, that drive, that need to prove themselves is going to come up when we talk about another one of her relationships. But before we do that, let's talk about the minions. The minions tell you a lot about Blair's need for control and also let you know how powerful she feels throughout a point in the series. And how kind of self-confident she is and like confident in her own power and intelligence and skill and all of these things. You see her more with minions and utilizing them early in the series than you do later. And when she does use them later, it's usually in times of distress or when you're supposed to be like, Blair girl, you're not supposed to do that. Do not do that. And the minions, especially early in the series, if you think about it, they're the things she can control. Her dad is gone. Nate is distant. We'll get to him, I promise. Serena's gone. What can she control? She can control these girls who want to be as powerful or interesting or popular or rich as she is. And so she uses them and she gets what she wants out of them and then moves on. While my girl is strict, they do get out of hand. They do kind of loosen the reins. They will do their own bullying. That's more so at the start of the series. It shows a little bit more about Blair's need for control. Like when they get out of control, it's usually when Blair is happy. Like she's not like, I gotta run this ship. She's like over there having a good time and they're acting up. And so I think that that's just another example of how they are kind of a way to communicate the control. And I think that Gossip Girl does a really good job of utilizing relationships, both with main, side, recurring characters, to really tell you a lot about who these people are and inform like kind of their identity as opposed to the storylines. The storylines make sense because of how they interact and engage with other people. You don't have to be told, oh, Blair's mean, oh, Blair needs control, oh, Blair does XYZ. You see it in the way that she interacts with people. Now let's get to the boyfriends. I only have the patience to talk about 4 of Blair's boyfriends, so I chose the most important ones. The first one is Nate Archibald, her boyfriend at the start of the series, like I mentioned before. Longtime boyfriend. I believe they started dating in like elementary school, something ridiculous. And he wants her best friend Serena bad, and he's had her, as I mentioned before. He's had her, and he is insatiable about it. Throughout the early episodes, Blair's really trying to give them a special first time, but he's already had his first time, and he's had it with his dream girl, so he is not interested. He's distant, especially when Serena gets back. He's like, Serena's here. Girl, like, try to be at least, like, discreet about it. And he represents what Blair thinks she should be, an Argyle sweater wearing girly. She's bigger than that, but, like, she wants to be, like, this high society woman who plans galas and wears, cardigans. That's not her. This is a boss. This is a hashtag girl boss. And so I think that it's interesting to see when she dates Nate a second time in the second season and like their interactions later on. They're really great friends. Never should have been together. Maybe before the series start, we don't know who she is. Maybe she grew into this person as the show progresses. But the Blair we come to know would never date Nate Archibald. Never. I'm here to talk again about a man I hate. This time it's Louis. Prince Louis or King Louis of Monaco. I hate him. He's gross. This was supposed to be Blair's like Cinderella moment. She meets a prince in Paris on vacation with Serena. She leaves him her shoe and he like leaves and it's like, if you're ever in New York City, you know how to find me, and like gives her a shoe, like full on Cinderella moment. And he does. He finds her. And you probably are thinking, oh, how cute. No, he should have stayed in Paris or Monaco or wherever he came from. He should have never came to New York City looking for my sister. He has big beef with Chuck, who we will get to, and that's valid. But like when I say Louis crazy, he feels so intimidated by Chuck and Blair's relationship that he hires someone to be a therapist to make Chuck worse. Think about that. Chuck is also nuts. Chuck goes to therapy to become a better person. And his ex's fiance is paying somebody to make him worse so that his fiance don't go back to him if he's a better person. Okay, Louis. Okay. And like I said, Blair is not in the right. Blair does mess up. Which is even crazier because this is the second time in the series that she doesn't know who the father of her potential baby is. She thinks she's pregnant earlier in the series and it's either Chuck or Nate's. And then later in the series, it's either Chuck or Louise. And you're just like, girl, please get it together. Diva. That's really giving diva down. And so I can understand if you're like, my fiance don't know who the baby daddy is, me or her ex, when we had been dating for months beforehand. I'd ask questions too, Louis. And on their first date, like I would have left her in Paris because on their first date, when they first meet, she thinks he's the prince. Then he pretends to be the prince's driver to see if she just wants him for like his money and power. And she just wanted him. I wouldn't even say that. My girl has her own money. But she wanted someone who was like upper echelon. She wanted someone who was like at least in her tax bracket or higher. And Driver does not give that. And so she kind of acts weird and he gives her a second chance. And then that's when the shoe thing happens. And all of this stuff happens and then they get engaged. And then if she couldn't take another red flag, her in-laws hate her. Like his mama, his sister hate her. They hate her. Like this is just a doomed relationship from all angles. Then on their wedding day, like we get to the wedding, my sister's at the aisle. Gossip Girl leaks a video of her saying she would always love Chuck forever, but she can't do anything about it, so she just gonna marry Louis anyway. And instead of walking away from the altar, Louis, you go for with saying I do and switching rings and kissing the bride. And then during your first dance, you say, "Oh, I'm about to make your life awful. We're like in a fake marriage, actually, and I hate you." Call it off. You're the victim. You can call it off, Louis. I was like, Blair could have called it off. But Blair's Delulu. And we'll get there. Because she's doing this because she made some oath to God to stay away from Chuck. Just craziness. God don't want nothing to do with you and Chuck. And then they get divorced off screen, thank God. And we all mourn for the people of Monaco because that is their king. That was Louis. I feel like we have to talk about Louis to talk about Chuck and Dan. But I didn't want to. But I had to. We hate you, Louis. I have a controversial secret to share. I love Blair and Dan together. I love it. 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 They are so equally yoked. I love it. I just had to say that so that you all knew when I started gushing about them that I am team Blair and Dan. I am. I am. I am. Similar to Jenny, they both have a drive to prove themselves. Dan's is some... Also, I hate Dan. Before I say this, I hate Dan. I love them together. Dan has this incessant need to prove himself and deserve to be in the Upper East Side. And Blair, as we discussed, has her own desires and needs to drive and push herself. And that makes them a good match. They push each other. They both love books. They love artsy movies. That's where they bond, actually, in season 4, I believe. They both are going to see the same movie. Then they start talking about the books they like. They end up interning in the same place. They really build a relationship. While Blair is going through all of the chaos with Louis, Dan is a really good friend to her during that. He's very supportive. He's the one who helps her flee when she realizes that man is crazy. And that's how they end up dating, which is why I had to talk about Louis. And they have really great chemistry. I knew a Dan and Blair relationship was on the table in season 1. The episode I mentioned before where Serena replaces Blair in the photo shoot, Serena had invited Dan to that photo shoot. And Dan sees everything that goes down and actually has this conversation with Blair all about like kind of Serena taking up the spotlight and how they both feel kind of outside of things. And I was like, oh, they're kindred spirits. They're gonna have a moment, like they're gonna have, even if it's short-lived, which it was, they're gonna have something together. And it took a while, and I think that it was worth it taking a while because Dan had to start feeling at least a part of Blair's world, where he always was like this outside. He was Lonely Boy, he was Humphrey, he was Brooklyn, whatever she wanted to call him. But they work there is a reality in this series that they are endgame, and I would have been okay with that endgame. However, there's one man who is just too powerful to defeat, I fear. Chuck Bass. Chuck Bass is the love of Blair Waldorf's life. And that is the only reason I can tolerate him. He's awful. This is an awful human being. I wish the writers had retconned the pilot. I will not go into detail about what happens in the pilot. But if they had retconned it because they decided that they were going to, pivot away. Things like that happen with pilots in season 1s all the time. You started a series, especially when it's based on something else, that you have this one idea of a character, but watching the show and how the audience responds, you take them in a different direction. And then we just have to pretend like things didn't happen. We should have done that with Chuck Bass because I cannot respect him because of what happens in the pilot. And other things. But it's specifically what happens in the pilot. Twice. So I retconned it myself. in this reality, the pilot did not happen, or at least those two scenes in the pilot do not happen. Blair and Chuck work because they're both insane and they support each other's insanity. I say that with love. I say for Blair. But they both are so intense and so vindictive and so like manipulative, and they love to come up with some plot to do together, and it works. It works for me. I love Blair and Chuck scenes across the show. I also think they work because Chuck is the only person I truly believe is not jealous of Blair most of the time. I think that that's the one thing that I do think drags Dan and Blair down, is that Dan is jealous of Blair and often like kind of shows it, or hints of being a little resentful of who Blair is in a way that Chuck is not. He loves how driven and ambitious she is and how she comes up with plots and schemes for them to do together. And I think comparatively, Dan loves Blair's mind and not her power. Chuck loves both. And that's what sets this pairing apart and tells us a lot about like what Blair gets and deserves at the end of the series, because she should be loved for all of her, not just a part of her that is the most palatable to a person, right? And they have a lot of iconic breakups. They do a lot of stupid things for each other. For example, Chuck's cousin says, if you give me Blair, I'll give you your hotel back. And Blair goes. So effectively, she was traded for a hotel. He sleeps with her enemy, Jenny Humphrey, knowing that's her enemy. And she sleeps with his Uncle Jack before the hotel trading thing, but still, I'm pretty sure she was a minor for that. So like, let's send Jack Bass to prison, but whatever. And then they both decide to reach their goals, and so they like break up until they reach their goals, which I think is cute, and like goes back to like, he's like, girl, go off, pop off, girl boss, and then come back to me. And so I think that they're just like so chaotic, they're so scheming, they're so intense that it really works. I smile when they're on my screen. Chuck really doesn't tell you much about Blair as a character to me. I think that what's interesting is that from the very beginning, the first time that they hook up, Chuck loves Blair for who Blair is. He sees who Blair is in all of it, the good and the bad and the ugly, and he wants it. And even when he pretends like he doesn't want it, he wants it. And I think that that's really what sets it apart. It's less telling you about Blair, it's showing you someone who accepts all of that about Blair. And I think that's what people love about that relationship and that pairing. It's what I like about it, at least. So to close, I think the questions are like, so why are we yapping about this girl? And I think that it's because a lot of people love Blair Waldorf. I love Blair. I think she's probably one of the most beloved characters in television. I think her ambition and drive a lot of people. She's so funny. She's hilarious. She's loving Dorota. What I mentioned about Serena's crash out in season 1. She doesn't play about her friends 8 times out of 10. The 2 times are when she's the one plotting against them. But she's also bad. She's conniving. She can be selfish. She's jealous. She can be a little twisted and sick. She's not a good person. But I think why people like her and what makes this character special and why I want to talk about her is kind of this closing thought, which is that she's compelling. She's easy to love and hard to hate. You empathize with her a lot of the time, and you root for her a lot of the time. Even when she's wrong, you want Blair to get what Blair wants because you really, really just see her trying. And I think that Blair is a really good example of a flawed character that we only ever really see praised or celebrated in men. Characters who aren't good people, but you love regardless, and you want to see get away or have the thing despite how badly they behave. And because we get to see a woman and we support women's rights and wrongs, I think that we should be giving characters like her flowers and making more of these complicated, complex female characters. So that's kind of it about me yapping and chatting about Blair Waldorf, one of my favorite television characters. Let me know in the comments, do you like Blair? Do you hate her? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you love hearing the ramblings of my brain, you'd probably like my newsletter, Brain Candy. I update you about new videos that are upcoming in addition to talking a little bit about current events and what's on my mind. So subscribe to that with the link in the description box, and subscribe to my channel for more content. We have a content calendar this year that we are trying to stick to. So see you next time. Bye.